Well, it's extremely important in the planning practice, and if you didn't follow up from the client meetings, then you wouldn't have a successful financial planning practice. It is completing the necessary tasks after the client meeting, and it includes things like meeting notes, trades, business processing, uploading notes and documents, tracking, business processing confirmation, and verifying compensation. We do track this using the client meeting outcome tracker. And then the objective, why is meeting follow-up important? So advisors, when meeting with clients, are making promises, and we want to fulfill those promises to the clients, hence the reason meeting follow-up is that important. I believe it to be one of the most important processes for a successfully run financial planning practice. All necessary business processing and tasks are being completed. Everything is properly documented, and this is the compliance requirements needed for the meeting follow-up. And then we're also making sure that the compensation is received. There you go. We do have some best practice resources, and they can both be found on Turnkey Solutions. Under the Client Experience folder, there are two of them, Meeting Follow-Up Preferences, because each financial advisory practice has his or her own preferences, and then a workflow that will show us what that process looks like. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that in just a couple minutes. The meeting follow-up preferences will promote consistent follow-up and holds the team members accountable. You'll see here in just a second, each practice, we recommend going through these preferences so that the entire team is familiar with who should be following up on what pieces. And then the workflow, each team member can follow along. It's more of a visual representation of that follow-up. And this allows us to know where each task is in the meeting follow-up process. Here's a screenshot of the meeting follow-up preferences. So we'll ask questions like, who is responsible for completing the meeting notes? Where are the meeting notes located? Who's responsible for marking those meetings done in Contact Manager? How are the how do you communicate the completion of the meeting notes? As the advisors finish the meeting notes, they usually have to put it in one location. Who is expected to review those meeting notes, and who is responsible for placing the necessary trades? This promotes consistency, especially when there are multiple team members involved in the follow-up. And you're able to think about who the best team member is to complete each of these steps. We help you complete these preferences when we work with you in a team setting or during your initial launch. And then we'll keep those up to date throughout the years as changes are made or not made. We just ensure that those preferences remain the same and are documented. This is an example of our best practice workflow on the meeting follow-up. And I do want to, I'd like to go through this with you today so that you can see what we recommend in a 3-person meeting follow-up process. So here's an example of when you have one advisor, or it could be multiple advisors following the same process. A business processor, and this is typically, can be a licensed team member, does not have to be a paraplanner. And then you have an administrator. Maybe your administrative assistant would do the top line. So once a client meeting has been completed, the advisor here would complete the trades and the meeting notes, communicating those meeting notes and paperwork to the preferred team member. In this instance, the preferred team member is the business processor, and that person reviews the paperwork for accuracy and completeness and forwards to the admin. The admin then takes many of the next steps, reviewing those meeting notes, assigning the tasks as needed, posting the meeting notes to contact manager and or online file manager for compliance requirements, completes the CMOT, the client meeting outcome tracker, marks the meetings done in contact manager, scans up any forms and documents and makes copies for file if desired, if not paperless yet, forwards forms and documents to the appropriate location. Some examples here: home office, CSU, the client, third party. And from there is where the tracking takes place. Typically, both the admin and the business processor are tracking and confirming all the promises made to the clients. The business processor can be the one to verify the comp received. And then if a NIGO or CSU email is received by the advisor, we recommend they follow the procedure and notify the business processor of actions taken. This can be customized by each practice. And so we have Kelly with us today to talk about how theirs has been customized. And I'll go through the process that Bridgenorth is taking. And this is a multiple advisor practice. So you'll see here this practice consists of 3 advisors and 3 staff, 1 admin, 1 business processor, and 1 marketing specialist. And they're also in 3 office locations. So Kelly's here to share her process with us, as it is one of the more complex processes with multiple advisors in multiple locations, but it can still be done and we can still fulfill those promises. So here is Kelly's process. Each advisor is responsible for completing their own meeting notes, and they do use the Connect Meeting Notes library. And then their administrative assistant, that's Kelly, marks the meetings done in Contact Manager, reviews them, and posts the meeting notes. And Kelly, you are posting those in Contact Manager, OFM, and the electronic client folder, correct?
Yes.
And are you, the electronic client folder for you, is that Box?
For paperwork submission, we are using Box. We've had everything on our shared drive, and then now all of that needs to be going up as well. So as we're submitting paperwork, then any supporting documentation that should go with that, we're also putting to the client file on OFM. And the meeting notes and, you know, the annual reviews and things of that nature, we post to Contact Manager and send from the queue to OFM, right. And the rest we're using from Box.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. And then I have next steps here. The business processor will complete the trades, and the administrative assistant on site, so remember there are 3 locations for this practice, will scan the forms and documents and save it to the client's electronic file. That same admin faxes, emails, mails the forms and documents to home office, CSU, or other required locations, like the client, if there's ever a reason to do so. And all the return mail goes to Kelly. So Kelly, I had a couple of questions for you, if you could just share some more of the details on this part. How does the business processor know to complete the trades? Where does that reminder go for the business processor?
The advisors, if there is an actionable item, as a trade, they have to do a meeting note. So if they get a phone call even, they do a meeting note. And then within that meeting note, they are creating a BPT and sending it to our designated person to complete trades.
Got it.
So anything that has a trade in it, they should start in a meeting note, and then they send, even if the meeting note's not complete, they can still process the BPT to our AFA who does all of our trades.
Great. And so for clarification then, for those of you that don't understand the meeting notes, when you create a meeting note, it not only is documentation of what happened in that meeting, but also you're able to populate the tracking tools from that meeting note. And so that's what's happening with your advisors. They're filling in the meeting notes, which then goes to the BPT. Okay, that makes sense. And then would that be the same for you then with return mail, since you are the one that follows up on those things? If there was anything that needed to be added to return mail, the advisor is responsible for completing that in their meeting notes? Or do you, or
I would say that
else?
when we process the meeting note, we make sure that the appropriate trackers are all in place.
Great.
As we're processing the meeting note. So sometimes they will do it in the meeting note if they're, aware that it needs to be done. Sometimes they just go in and they process a trade and then come back to complete the meeting note, and they don't do the other steps. So as we're processing the meeting note, we make sure all of the, appropriate people have been notified of the next steps.
Great.
The other tracking tools. Yes.
Great. And I just want to note this process that they are using really is the most efficient process for follow-up, because the advisors are responsible for the promises that they made by filling that in on the meeting notes. Much of it can be automatically submitted to the tracking tools, and then you have your team members that are just doing that review to ensure that they are getting to the right place.
Right.
And lastly, and not all practices do this, but the compensation statement can be reviewed by a staff member or the advisor, but it is the advisor in this instance. And the advisor would follow up with home office if improperly compensated.
Right. We haven't been great about this, but we're working
and you're not
to
the only one.
Better processes.
Yeah, so if you remember back to that workflow that I showed you, one of the, we recommend best practice for verifying comp would be on the business processor or someone that has more time than the advisor to actually make that happen. So a couple of group discussion questions. I'll start with the first one. Does your practice use Connect meeting notes?
Yes.
And there is now a poll question, so we can just take count here if you wouldn't mind filling that in. Perfect. Erica, I know that just said 100%, but are you using the meeting notes in your practice?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure that got the count right. And then does one person complete all the meeting follow-up for the practice? I'm going to guess no. Perfect. And for both of you, because I am familiar with the practice structures, yes, absolutely the answer is no. How has your practice customized your meeting follow-up process? So Erica, if you wouldn't mind sharing maybe any differences that that your practice has, we would love to hear it.
Okay. Yeah, what actually we do is Phil is an AFA with John, and he actually sits in on most of the meetings with John. He completes the meeting notes, does the trades, and then hands the file to me so I can go over the meeting notes, upload them, and do any any of the rest of the follow-up that's needed.
Great.
And Lisa, she reviews the comp and everything.
And there are a few other practices that I work with that also have a case manager sitting in the meeting. With Cornerstone differences, they don't have a case manager sitting in their meetings, and they do complete the meeting notes, but all of the follow-up is manually entered into the tracking tools, not through the Connect meeting notes.
Yeah, that we do the same thing too.
Okay. When you use the Connect meeting notes, Erica, or when they are using the Connect meeting notes, is it more for just documentation instead of populating the tracking tools?
Yes.
Who, and then remind me again if you already said this, who is the one that reviews those meeting notes and then updates the tracking tools?
Well, Phil, he completes the meeting notes, updates. We each have our own tracking tools that we're in charge of. He does his tracking tools, and then when he's done with the file, he gives it to me, and I review the meeting notes, and I do my tracking tools.
Okay, so you've divided it with your practice.
Yes.
Great. If you've experienced a different way to do meeting follow-up, so the question, the second bullet here, what follow-up processes have you been most successful or unsuccessful with? Have either of you experienced unsuccessful processes or maybe less efficient?
I don't think so. I can't think of being unsuccessful with it.
I think for our practice, it's more making sure that everyone is following the right process. That's been our challenge. Because if any one person goes outside of the process, then things are missed. So just getting everyone to follow all of the process would be where we've been unsuccessful at times. Like they'll have a phone call and they'll do a trade. Well, they won't do a meeting note, and with a tracking tool that all of us can see, they'll do a SmartPad note. Or, you know, so some of those things come up from time to time. But it's been a lot of good structure for us, and we all have a lot of accountability. So I'd say it's more successful than unsuccessful. But we do have an occasional rogue moment.
I would say ours for Cornerstone would be where we would be unsuccessful is when an advisor takes too much time to complete the meeting notes, because those promises.
We have that too.
Yeah, those promises that are made to the clients are not fulfilled, or if they are, they're late. So it's very important. Those meeting notes are very important. No matter the fashion of meeting notes, they are important. And then for the last one there, how does the meeting follow-up process work if your practice has multiple locations and or multiple advisors? Kelly, we've already shared your example, and Erica has one advisor in one location. So I will speak to Cornerstone because Cornerstone has multiple advisors and multiple locations. And ultimately, the process remains the same because we have the same team in one location, processing all of the business and doing all those meeting follow-up tasks. But the advisors are the ones responsible for getting those meeting notes to the one location. So that piece does end up falling on the advisor. And that completes the meeting follow-up topic. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions from you, Carla?
Well, I did see where you had indicated that the administrative assistant is to follow up on some of the meeting notes.
Mm-hmm.
I have not started doing that yet.
Mhm.
I am scheduled to assist Rick with doing some meeting notes,
Okay.
but I think we'll probably get a chance to do it Friday. So, but it's up to the advisor to put the notes into Connect or into Compass so how would I follow up as the administrative assistant?
Oh, great question. So some practices, and this goes back to the multiple advisors and multiple locations, some practices will have one person reviewing the meeting notes and assigning all the tasks out. Okay. For Cornerstone, that one person is Stacy, and she reads through those meeting notes and she assigns everything out. Okay. So anything that you would be responsible for, you would see on the appropriate tracker. Okay. Very similar to how Kelly's is structured, where it's just that the advisors are filling out the meeting notes, but their business processor is actually doing the reviewing and making sure that the tasks are on the appropriate trackers. Okay. So that's where the preference document for every advisor is important. That is why it's so important, because each practice is laid out differently, and we want to make sure that that gets saved on Connect. Great. All right.